The American people, not for the first time, are ahead of the politicians in Washington. But I want to tell you that the American people can make Washington sit up and pay attention because they did it once before. During the Nixon impeachment process, Nixon was elected. It's very important to understand the history here because sometimes people get discouraged. Richard Nixon was elected in November 1972 with one of the biggest landslides in the history of the United States. That's because the cover-up, the criminal cover-up, was so successful, nobody was even mentioning that there was anything to do with the president and his top people and the break-in of the Watergate Hotel. When that started to unravel, what happened? You had John Dean. You had other revelations. Did the Congress talk about impeachment? Absolutely not. And it was a democratically controlled House and Senate. Did they say, oh, we have to have impeachment now? Absolutely not. They did nothing. They did nothing. Then the American people spoke. President Nixon fired the special prosecutor who was trying to get information about him, and the American people said, that's it. Enough is enough. We can't have a president who's above the law. We can't have a president stop an investigation of himself. We are not a banana republic. We're the United States of America. And Congress, you have to act. And they forced Congress to act. It wasn't Congress. You had a Republican president, Democratic House, Democratic Senate. It was the American people. They can do it again. That's why this is so critical. Cindy Sheehan is so correct when she says people have to walk and educate their congresspeople. They have to do that. They have to educate other Americans that this is possible. I believe it's mandatory because the Constitution was given to us as a precious legacy from those before us. How are we going to hand it down to our children? Shriveled, shrunken, torn, scratched, stained? That's what we want? I don't think so. I don't think so. So, let me just say, to give you the weapons, if you will, for those who are going to be the naysayers here. Plenty of people don't want to do it. They didn't want to do it then. They were forced to do it because of the American people. So, people say, why should we have impeachment? We now have the Democrats in charge. That's enough. Checks and balances are restored. Who needs it? Well, we had checks and balances with regard to Nixon. We had the Democrats controlling the House and Senate, and we had the President of the United States. Why do we have to do impeachment? We had checks and balances. The Constitution doesn't require the minimum. It requires the maximum. We can't have a President of the United States who puts himself above the rule of law if we want to continue as a democracy. And that's it. No ifs, ands, or buts. So the fact that we restored some checks and some balances doesn't mean that we are not obliged to remove a person who threatens our democracy from the presidency. Secondly, revenge. This is not about revenge. The effort against Richard Nixon wasn't about revenge. Far from it. It was a bipartisan effort. It was supported by an overwhelming majority of the American people, most of whom had voted for Nixon. The same people who had voted for Nixon were the ones who called the members of Congress and telegraphed them and wrote to them and protested in front of them because they understood that this man was shredding the Constitution. It's not a partisan thing. It's not a matter of revenge. It's a matter of setting the right standards and holding those accountable who lied and deceived the American people and who want to shred the Constitution still. There are also those who say that this will disrupt Congress. You know, there's some people who think that Congress can't walk and chew gum at the same time. I remember they said that about a president, but we won't get into that. Congress, during the impeachment of Richard Nixon, did all the business of the country, and the House Judiciary Committee did its job. Nothing was disrupted. And for those who say it will divide the country, the impeachment of Richard Nixon brought us together. How? We all recognize that we share the same values as a country. The values being not a president, one person, not a party, not a political situation, but our commitment to the Constitution and to the rule of law. And when we discovered that we shared those values, that strengthened us and united us. Let me just say one other thing about that. The other point is Americans only care about improving minimum wage, getting more health care, lower interest on student loans. Of course they care about that. But don't Americans care about the Constitution? Don't we care about freedom? Don't we care about liberty? Of course we do. And anyone who says that is denigrating the intelligence of the American people, because it is our Constitution and our democracy that make all of those other things possible. Okay. We need to investigate. There's no formula for how you conduct an impeachment. You don't need a Congress investigation. Actually, if you go back to Watergate, you had a select Senate committee that began the investigations. Started in the Senate, bipartisan, equal representation. That's what Howard Baker asked the famous question, what did the president know and when did he know it? The same questions applicable to George W. Bush. What did the president know before the war started? When did he know it? Same questions. There's no formula. House can conduct inquiries, Senate can conduct inquiries. Those inquiries have to be focused, though, on getting us the answers to the basic questions. What are those? Why did the president drive us into war on a basis of deception? And how did he do it? And document what he knew and when he knew it. That's critical, because no American should ever have to give one drop of blood for a lie. Ever. What exactly did the president know about the torture and the mistreatment of detainees? What was he told, and when was he told it? And why didn't he ever follow the law and bring to punishment and bring to accountability those, even up to the top, who ordered or engaged in the torture? And what about Katrina? We never got all the emails from the White House as the president sat and listened to being told about the catastrophe that was going to happen and walked away to continue his investigation. Yes, we need investigations of Halliburton, and yes, we need investigations of corruption, but we need to get investigations that will ultimately expose the lies and the misconduct that will amount to impeachable offenses. I believe we have the evidence we need. As a former prosecutor, I always like to have more. It's good to have your quiver full of a lot of arrows. We can do those investigations. We have to have a process that's fair, bipartisan, and that the American people can support. But we are here today to assure the framers of the Constitution, the veterans who fought in our wars, and the prior generations who brought us to where we are today, that we are going to hold up our end of the bargain and preserve the Constitution for future generations and bring George W. Bush and Richard Cheney to account and to impeachment.